Tom had been waiting for this moment for a very long time. He worked hard every day in the city, with a job that was stressful and busy. His small ranch, far from the noise and rush, was his dream place. It was a quiet land with green fields and a small lake at the center. This weekend, Tom planned to camp by the lake and spend 2 whole days away from the city, away from phones, meetings, and noise. The sun was still warm as Tom drove down the narrow dirt road leading to his ranch. The trees on both sides of the road seemed to welcome him back with their quiet rustling. Tom smiled to himself. Finally, some peace, he thought. He had dreamed of this trip for months, saving money, fixing his old truck, and packing the things he needed. When he reached the ranch, Tom stopped and looked around. The lake was calm and clear, with small fish swimming near the edge. The soft sound of the water gently touching the shore made Tom feel calm. He stepped out of his truck, breathed the fresh air deeply, and smiled again. This was his place, his own little world. Tom took out his camping bag and started setting up a small tent near the lake. He worked quietly, enjoying the warm sun and cool breeze. The tall trees gave shade, and the birds sang sweet songs. He put the tent carefully near a group of bushes to get some shelter from the wind. Then, he gathered some dry wood for a campfire, hoping to cook dinner later. As the sun moved slowly down the sky, Tom sat on a small rock and looked at the water. He felt happy but also a little tired. Work had been hard, and the city life was noisy and crowded. Here, by the lake, he felt free. The worries and stress seemed far away. Tom pulled out a small notebook from his bag. He liked to write sometimes, especially here at the ranch. He wrote about his dreams, his hopes, and how much he loved this land. The pages filled slowly, with words about freedom, peace, and new beginnings. When the sky started to change colors, from blue to orange and pink, Tom lit the campfire. The fire crackled and popped, sending warm light over his face. He cooked a simple meal, some bread and beans, but it tasted delicious in the quiet evening air. As he ate, Tom thought about how lucky he was to have this place. He knew that many people would never have a chance to own such a peaceful spot. For him, it was more than just land, it was a place where he could feel himself again. Night came quickly. The stars shone bright in the clear sky, and the moon made the lake sparkle like silver. Tom lay back in his sleeping bag, listening to the sounds of nature, crickets chirping, leaves rustling, and the soft splash of water. For the first time in a long time, Tom felt calm. He closed his eyes and let the quiet night fill his heart. Tomorrow, he planned to explore more of his ranch, maybe fish in the lake, or just walk through the trees. But as he drifted to sleep, he did not know that this peaceful night would soon be interrupted. Some people nearby thought the lake was not his to use. They had their own ideas about who should come to this quiet place. And soon, those ideas would bring unexpected trouble for Tom. Tom woke up early the next morning, feeling refreshed from the peaceful night by the lake. The cool morning air was fresh and clean. Birds sang happily in the trees, and the sunlight slowly touched the grass and water, making everything look bright and new. He stretched and smiled. This was exactly what he needed, a break from the busy city and all its noise. He stepped outside his tent, took a deep breath, and looked around his ranch. The lake was calm again, shining in the morning sun. Tom decided to explore a little. He wanted to walk around the lake, find a good spot to sit and maybe catch some fish for lunch. He packed a small bag with a fishing rod, some snacks, and a bottle of water. The soft ground felt good under his boots as he walked along the water's edge. After a while, he found a nice place under a big tree. He sat down, opened his fishing box, and prepared his line. The silence was wonderful, only the sounds of nature filled the air. Tom felt happy and relaxed. Suddenly, he heard voices. At first, they were far away, soft and unclear. Then, they grew louder. Tom looked up and saw 3 people walking toward him. They were not from the city, but they didn't look like local neighbors either. They wore clothes with badges and carried some papers. "Good morning," one of them said as they got closer. He was tall with dark hair and a serious face. "I'm Mark. This is my team. We work with the Homeowners Association." Tom blinked. He knew a little about the Homeowners Association, or HOA. It was a group that made rules for neighbors living near each other. But Tom had never had any problems with them before. "Hello," Tom said politely, standing up. "Can I help you?" Mark looked around and nodded. "We heard someone was camping here, near the lake. This area is part of the HOA property, and camping is not allowed. You need to leave." Tom's heart beat faster. "I'm sorry, but this is my land," he said firmly. "I bought this ranch last year. The lake and the land around it belong to me." Mark raised an eyebrow. "We have maps and documents from the HOA. According to them, this is not your property. You may be on HOA land." Tom frowned. "I have papers that say otherwise," he replied, pulling out his phone to show pictures of his ownership papers. "Look. I have the deed and all the documents. This is my land." Mark glanced at the phone but didn't seem convinced. "We need to check this with the HOA board. Please pack up and leave for now." Tom felt a cold wave of worry and anger. How could this happen? He owned this land. The thought of leaving his own ranch felt wrong. "I can't just leave my property," Tom said quietly. "This is my home." Mark sighed. "Sir, if you don't leave, we may have to call the police." Before Tom could answer, 2 police officers arrived. They drove slowly onto the dirt road, their car lights flashing softly in the morning sun. Tom's heart sank. The officers got out and approached the group. One officer, a woman with kind eyes, asked Tom for his name and identification. Tom showed his driver's license and the ownership papers again. "We need to verify these documents," the other officer said. "There have been complaints about trespassing in this area." Tom tried to explain calmly. "I own this land, including the lake. I have papers that show it." The officers looked serious but patient. They told Tom to wait while they made a call to the county office to check the property records. Tom sat on a nearby rock, feeling confused and worried. How could this happen? He had never been in trouble before. This ranch was supposed to be his safe place, but now it felt like a trap. Mark and his team talked quietly nearby. Tom overheard words like illegal camping and property dispute. His stomach twisted. After what felt like a long time, one officer returned and said, "We are still waiting for official confirmation. For now, we ask you to leave this area to avoid any problems." Tom shook his head slowly. "I can't leave my own land," he said. "I will stay until this is clear." The officers exchanged looks. "Sir, we understand, but if you refuse to leave, we may have to take further action." Tom's voice was steady but sad. "Please check everything carefully. This is my home, and I won't leave until the truth is clear." The officers nodded but stayed close, ready to act if needed. As the strangers and police stayed around, Tom sat quietly by his campfire, now cold and dark. The peaceful morning he had dreamed of was gone. The place he loved was filled with tension and doubt. He looked at the lake, hoping the water would wash away his fears. But the problem was bigger than he thought. Some people believed he did not own this land, and their doubts were turning into actions against him. Tom knew he had to find answers soon. This weekend was no longer just about rest, it was about fighting for his home, his rights, and his peace. The afternoon sun was warm, but Tom felt a cold weight in his chest. The peaceful weekend he had planned was now filled with questions and confusion. The police officers stayed nearby, watching him carefully. The three men from the Homeowners Association kept checking their papers and whispering to each other. Tom tried to calm his mind. He knew he owned this land, he had the deed, the papers, everything was clear. But the HOA and even the police seemed unsure. How could this happen? One of the officers, a tall man named Officer Lee, approached Tom. "Sir, we have tried calling the county office to check the property records. Unfortunately, they are closed for the day, so we can't confirm ownership right now." Tom felt frustrated. "So, I have to leave my own land, without proof that it's theirs?" Officer Lee shook his head slowly. "We ask you to leave for now, just to avoid any trouble. Once the records are checked, we can talk again." Tom looked at the lake, then back at the officers. His heart was heavy. This was his home, and no one should tell him to leave without proof. But arguing with police was not a good idea either. Reluctantly, Tom started to pack his tent and camp supplies. The men from the HOA watched closely, but said nothing. Tom wondered if they believed they were right, or if they were just trying to protect their own interests. As he folded his sleeping bag, a small voice inside him whispered, "You can't give up." When the tent was packed, Tom loaded his gear into the truck. The officers stayed calm but firm, telling him that if he came back before the problem was solved, he might face legal trouble. Tom drove slowly away from the lake, feeling sadness and anger mix inside him. He looked back once, at the peaceful water shining under the sun. How could this be happening? His ranch, his quiet place, was now a place of conflict. That evening, Tom went to the town library. He wanted to find the property maps and records himself. Maybe he could prove once and for all that the land was his. The library was quiet and smelled like old books. Tom sat at a table and opened the county property records on the computer. He searched for his name, his address, and the ranch's location. To his relief, the records showed his name clearly. The map on the screen marked the land boundaries, including the lake as his property. Tom printed the pages. He also copied the property deed from his phone to a USB drive, planning to show everything to the police or the HOA. But he knew that proof on paper was only one part of the problem. The HOA had power and influence. They were the people neighbors listened to, and they made many rules. Still, Tom was determined not to back down. The next day, Tom called the police station. He spoke calmly with Officer Lee. "I have the official records that show the land belongs to me," Tom said. "What can I do to fix this misunderstanding?" Officer Lee listened carefully. "Thank you for sharing this information. I will talk to my supervisors and the HOA representatives. We want to solve this peacefully." Tom felt a small hope growing. Maybe the truth would come out soon. Later that day, Tom received a message from the HOA board. They invited him to a meeting to discuss the problem. Tom agreed. He knew it was important to face this challenge head-on. At the meeting, held in a small community hall, Tom met the HOA members face to face. Some were neighbors he had seen before, others were strangers. There was a mix of curiosity and tension in the room. Tom stood up and showed his documents. "I want to clear up the confusion," he said. "This land, including the lake, is mine. I have the county records and the deed to prove it." The HOA members looked at the papers, whispering among themselves. One woman, who seemed to be the leader, spoke carefully. "We are sorry if there was a mistake," she said. "Our maps may be old, and we didn't check with the county before acting." Tom nodded. "I understand, but this has caused me a lot of stress. I just want to enjoy my land peacefully." The leader sighed. "We want the same. We will work with you to fix our maps and rules, so this doesn't happen again." The room relaxed a little. Some neighbors smiled, and a few even apologized for the confusion. Tom felt relief but also knew the work was not over. This was only the first step toward fixing a problem that had hurt his trust in the community. As the meeting ended, Tom spoke quietly to the leader. "Thank you for listening. I hope we can find a way to live together without problems." She nodded. "That's our goal, too." Driving back to his ranch, Tom thought about the day. The peace he had come for was still far away, but at least he had started to fight for it. He looked at the sky, now pink and orange with sunset colors. Tomorrow was another day, another chance to make things right. And Tom knew one thing for sure: he would not give up on his home. The next morning, Tom woke up early again, feeling a mixture of hope and worry. The meeting with the HOA had ended with promises to work together, but Tom knew that words alone would not solve the problem. He needed to be sure the truth had to be clear and official. After breakfast, Tom decided to visit the county office in person. It was a small building in the town center, with a few clerks behind counters and files stacked high on shelves. Tom approached the property records desk, where a friendly woman named Mrs. Green greeted him. "Good morning, Tom," she said with a warm smile. "How can I help you today?" Tom explained everything: the confusion about the land, the HOA's claim, and his desire to see the official property maps and documents. Mrs. Green nodded understandingly and led him to a large table filled with maps and papers. Together, they looked over the county's official property maps. Tom's ranch was clearly marked in bright colors, with clear boundaries. The lake was part of his land, just as he had always believed. Mrs. Green pointed to the documents. "This is your deed, right?" she asked. "Yes," Tom said, showing her his copy. "These maps are the official records kept by the county," she explained. "If there is any dispute, these maps and documents are the final word." Tom felt relief, but also frustration. "Why would the HOA have different maps?" he asked. Mrs. Green shrugged. "Sometimes, private groups like HOAs use old maps or create their own boundaries. It's not unusual for mistakes to happen, especially in areas where land lines are not clear." Tom thanked Mrs. Green and took copies of the maps and documents with him. He knew these papers were his strongest proof. Outside the county office, the sun was shining brightly, but Tom's thoughts were heavy. How could neighbors and a powerful association make a mistake like this? How many other people might have faced problems like his? Determined to fix the situation, Tom decided to visit some neighbors and talk to them directly. Maybe they did not know the whole story. Maybe some of them would support him. He walked down the quiet streets, carrying the papers carefully. The first neighbor he visited was Mrs. White, an older woman who lived in a small house near the ranch. "Hello, Mrs. White," Tom said kindly. "I want to talk to you about the ranch and the lake." Mrs. White invited him inside. Over a cup of tea, Tom showed her the maps and explained the confusion with the Hoa. "Oh, Tom," Mrs. White said softly, "I'm sorry you had to go through this. I had no idea. I always thought the lake belonged to the community." Tom nodded. "That's what the Hoa says, but it's not true. This land is mine. I want to keep it peaceful for everyone, but I also want my rights respected." Mrs. White smiled gently. "You're a good neighbor, Tom. I'll talk to some of the others for you." Encouraged by this, Tom visited more neighbors. Some listened carefully, others looked uncertain. But as he showed the official documents, a few promised to speak up at the next Hoa meeting. Back at the ranch, Tom sat by the lake, watching the water sparkle. For the first time in days, he felt a small light of hope. Maybe the truth was starting to shine through the confusion. That evening, Tom called the Hoa leader, Mrs. Clark. "I have the official maps and deeds from the county," he said. "I want to share them with you and fix this problem." Mrs. Clark agreed to meet the next day at the Hoa office. Tom hoped this meeting would bring understanding and peace. The following afternoon, Tom arrived at the Hoa office with his papers carefully organized. Mrs. Clark and two other board members were waiting. Tom spread the maps and deeds on the table. "These are the official records from the county," he said calmly. "They show clearly that the ranch and the lake belong to me." Mrs. Clark studied the documents quietly. After a moment, she nodded slowly. "It seems there was a mistake on our part," she admitted. "Our maps are old and not accurate." Tom felt a rush of relief but stayed calm. "I want to work with you to correct your records and avoid future problems." Mrs. Clark smiled. "That is fair. We will update our maps and notify all members. I am sorry for the trouble we caused." They agreed on a plan to fix the mistakes. The Hoa would send letters to neighbors, explaining the new boundaries and rules. They would also set up a committee to review land boundaries carefully. As Tom left the office, he felt lighter. The truth was out, and people were ready to listen. Back at the ranch, Tom sat by the lake as the sun set behind the hills. The water was calm, reflecting the colors of the sky. The fight was not over, but Tom knew the first steps toward peace had been taken. He smiled quietly. This land was his, and soon, the neighbors would understand that too. Tom felt a mix of hope and nervousness as the date of the next Hoa meeting approached. This time, he was ready. He had the official maps, the deeds, and the support of some neighbors who had listened to his story. But standing up in front of the Hoa board and community members was not easy. The community hall was small but filled with people. Some faces looked curious, some doubtful, and a few friendly. Tom took a deep breath and stepped to the front of the room. He knew this was important not just for himself but for his family and his future on the ranch. "Good evening," Tom began, his voice steady but calm. "I want to thank everyone for coming. I know there has been confusion about the property lines around the lake and the ranch. I'm here to share the truth and ask for your understanding." He held up the maps and documents. "These are the official records from the county. They show that the ranch and the lake belong to me. I want to live peacefully here and work together with the community." Some people murmured quietly, others looked surprised. Tom continued, "I understand why the Hoa made the mistake. Their maps were old, and the boundaries were not clear. But this misunderstanding caused me a lot of pain and worry. I hope we can fix this and move forward." One of the older neighbors, Mr. Harris, raised his hand. "Tom, thank you for explaining. I was confused about this too. We've always thought the lake was shared. But I see now that we were wrong. I support you. Several others nodded in agreement. A woman named Susan stood up. I want to apologize. We should have checked before making accusations. I hope we can all be friends and neighbors. The room grew warmer with understanding. Tom smiled inside. This was what he had hoped for: honesty and respect. The HOA board leader, Mrs. Clark, stepped forward. We are sorry for the trouble caused. We will update our records and work with Tom to make sure everyone knows the real boundaries. She continued, we also want to create new rules that protect property owners and keep the community peaceful. Tom nodded. Thank you. I want to be part of that effort. After the meeting, some neighbors came to talk to Tom. They shared stories about their own experiences with the land and their hopes for the community. One young man, David, said, I'm glad you stood up, Tom. It's not easy, but you did the right thing. Tom felt grateful. For the first time, he felt truly accepted by some of the people around him. As the weeks passed, Tom worked closely with the HOA. They held meetings, updated maps, and sent letters to all residents explaining the correct property lines. The tension that had once filled the air slowly began to fade. At the ranch, Tom spent more time fixing the trails around the lake and planting flowers near the entrance. Some neighbors even came to help, bringing tools and seeds. Together, they made the place more beautiful. One afternoon, as Tom sat by the lake, he saw a group of children playing nearby. Their laughter filled the air. He realized that this land was not just his, it was a part of the community now. But even with the new understanding, Tom knew that trust had to be earned. He decided to organize a small gathering at the ranch, inviting neighbors for a picnic by the lake. The day of the picnic was warm and sunny. Tom set up tables with food, blankets, and games. One by one, neighbors arrived, carrying baskets and smiles. They ate, talked, and shared stories. Some brought instruments, and soon, music filled the air. Children ran around, chasing each other near the water. Tom watched and felt a deep happiness. The ranch was alive with friendship and joy. The conflict that had once shadowed the lake was gone. As the sun began to set, Tom stood quietly by the water. He thought about the journey from the moment strangers told him to leave, to the difficult meetings and hard work that followed. He smiled softly. This land was more than just soil and water. It was a place where people could come together, where mistakes could be forgiven, and where new bonds could grow. Tom knew the road ahead might still have challenges, but he was ready. He had stood up for what was right, and now, he was part of something bigger than himself. The lake shimmered gently in the evening light, a mirror to Tom's heart, calm, hopeful, and full of promise. Days turned into weeks, and life at the ranch slowly returned to a peaceful rhythm. The misunderstanding with the HOA had finally been cleared up, but Tom knew that trust could take time to rebuild. He was patient and ready to do what it took. One bright morning, Tom woke up early and walked down to the lake. The water was smooth like glass, reflecting the blue sky and green trees. It was his favorite place to think and feel calm. As he stood by the water's edge, he saw a small boat floating nearby. Someone had left it there. Tom smiled. Maybe it was a gift from a neighbor, a sign that things were getting better. He decided to take the boat out on the lake. Sitting in the gentle rocking, Tom felt a quiet happiness. The sun warmed his face, and the soft sounds of birds made the moment perfect. Later, Tom returned to his ranch house to work on a project he had been thinking about for a long time, building a small community garden. He wanted a place where neighbors could come together, plant flowers and vegetables, and share time in a friendly way. He shared his idea at the next HOA meeting. "A garden is a good way for all of us to connect," he said. "It will help us grow trust and friendship." The board liked the idea and agreed to help. Soon, Tom and a few neighbors began clearing a small field near the ranch. They brought tools, seeds, and dirt, working side by side in the warm sun. Children ran around, curious and excited to plant their first seeds. Some elderly neighbors shared stories about gardens they had in the past. The air was full of laughter and hope. Tom felt proud. This garden was more than just plants growing in soil. It was a symbol of new beginnings. One afternoon, as Tom worked in the garden, a young woman named Emily came to visit. She was new to the neighborhood and had heard about the ranch and the lake. "I've always loved the countryside," Emily said, smiling warmly. "I want to help with the garden if I can." Tom welcomed her gladly. "The more, the better," he said. "This is a place for everyone." Emily returned often, bringing fresh ideas and energy. Together, they planted flowers along the path and started a small herb section. As the weeks passed, the garden grew lush and colorful. Neighbors brought home-grown vegetables to share at meetings and picnics. The spirit of community blossomed. One evening, after a long day, Tom sat by the lake watching the sun set behind the hills. The orange and pink colors filled the sky, and the water reflected the beauty perfectly. He thought about everything he had been through: the fear of losing his land, the struggle with the HOA, the doubt and worry. Now, he saw how those hard moments had changed into something good. Tom reached into his pocket and pulled out a small photo of his family. His children had sent it to him, reminding him why he worked so hard to keep the ranch safe and peaceful. A soft breeze touched his face as he whispered, "Thank you." Just then, a car pulled up near the ranch house. It was Officer Lee, the kind police officer who had first come to the lake weeks ago. "Hi, Tom," Officer Lee said with a smile. "I wanted to see how things are going." Tom stood up and shook his hand. "Much better, thanks to the community." Officer Lee looked around and nodded. "I'm glad to see peace here. If you ever need help, don't hesitate to call." Tom appreciated the offer. "Thank you, I will." As Officer Lee left, Tom felt a warm sense of security. The ranch was not just a place on a map, it was a home filled with friends, neighbors, and support. That night, Tom sat on his porch, watching the stars. The world felt wide and full of possibility. He knew the fight for his land had taught him many things: patience, courage, and the power of kindness. More than anything, Tom knew he belonged here. This was his home, and he would protect it with all his heart. The ranch, the lake, and the garden were more than land. They were a new beginning. The days at the ranch had grown calm and full of small joys. Tom felt a peace he had not known since the trouble began. The neighbors, once distant and doubtful, had become friends. The garden bloomed with colors, the lake sparkled under the sun, and laughter often filled the air. One warm morning, Tom stood at the edge of the lake, watching the water ripple gently. The memories of the past few weeks floated through his mind: the cold surprise of being told he was trespassing, the meetings, the doubts, and the hard work to fix the mistakes. But now, everything felt different. The HOA had updated their maps and rules. The letters explaining the new boundaries were sent to every home. Slowly, the community had come together, building trust and respect. Tom smiled as he saw children playing near the water, their faces full of joy. Families picnicked under the tall trees. Even some of the older neighbors came to visit the ranch more often. The garden project had become a regular place for neighbors to meet. On weekends, Tom, Emily, and others worked side by side, planting, watering, and sharing stories. The simple act of gardening had brought the community closer. One afternoon, as Tom walked back from the garden, he found Mrs. Clark, the Hoa leader, waiting by the ranch gate. "Tom," she said with a kind smile, "I want to thank you. You showed patience and courage. Without you, this place might never have found peace." Tom shook her hand. "Thank you for listening and helping fix the problems. We all want the same thing: a happy, peaceful community." Mrs. Clark nodded. "Yes, and we will keep working together." Tom felt proud. He had stood up for his rights, but he had also learned the importance of forgiveness and cooperation. That evening, Tom invited some neighbors to a small dinner at the ranch. Around a long wooden table, people shared food and stories. The atmosphere was warm and full of friendship. As the sun set and stars appeared, Tom looked around and felt a deep gratitude. This land, this ranch, was no longer just his property. It was a place where hearts came together. Later, when the guests had left, Tom sat alone by the lake. The water reflected the shining stars, and a gentle breeze moved through the trees. He thought about the journey, the struggle, the fear, the anger, and how it had changed into something good. He whispered softly, "This is home." The next morning, Tom received a letter in the mail. It was from the county office, confirming that the Hoas records had been officially updated with the correct property lines. There would be no more confusion. Tom felt a wave of relief wash over him. The fight was over. Peace was restored. He decided to take a walk around the ranch, visiting the places he loved most. At the edge of the forest, he paused and listened to the birds singing. Near the old oak tree, he sat for a moment, feeling the strength of the earth beneath him. Tom's heart was full. Life was not always easy. There would be challenges ahead, but now he knew he was not alone. He had the truth, the support of his neighbors, and a community that cared. As he stood by the lake once more, Tom made a silent promise. He would protect this place, his home, not just with words, but with kindness and respect. And he would remember the lesson that had changed everything: sometimes, the hardest battles bring the greatest peace. The lake shimmered quietly in the morning sun, a symbol of hope and new beginnings. And Tom knew, no matter what came next, he had found his place in the world.